There's a lot that goes on in Star Wars, and plenty of it enough to confuse the viewer. The Skywalker Saga is a sprawling, expansive epic that takes place over a period of decades, and while it has mostly come together to form one cohesive whole, there are still plenty of questions that the films leave unanswered. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture Star Wars, and here are 8 Star Wars questions that always confused you. Number 8. What were Count Dooku's real motivations? Christopher Lee's Count Dooku was criminally underused in the Star Wars prequels and was poorly served by the material provided. By the time the character pops his clogs in Revenge of the Sith, executed by Darth Sidious's would-be replacement apprentice, fans were left with only a vague idea of what exactly Dooku was as a character. What compelled him to leave the Jedi Order and fight against the Republic? Was he loyal to Palpatine? Was he sincere to Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones? None of these answers are forthcoming in either episodes 2 or 3, and it's a shame because the premise behind Dooku, him being Yoda's apprentice and then Qui-Gon's master before leaving the Order, is truly fascinating. But although Dooku was wasted in the prequels, the character has found a second life in expanded material. The Clone Wars animated series goes some way in explaining the character's loyalty to Darth Sidious, or lack thereof, but also his own ambitions for power. Books like Master and Apprentice and Dooku Jedi Lost, meanwhile, have worked to bridge the connection between Dooku and his former Padawan Qui-Gon Jinn. These stories have revealed a great deal about the former Jedi, how he lost faith in the Republic and the Order, and how he was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He primarily joined Sidious to end corruption in the Republic, but while he started out with noble intentions, believing that a wise Force user could tame the dark side, the Count soon succumbed to its influence and became but another pawn in Palpatine's quest for power. Wider materials make clear that Dooku was prepared to try and challenge his master, recruiting no less than 3 apprentices in Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and even briefly Quinlan Vos throughout the Clone Wars, but he was never afforded the opportunity. It reframes the character in more tragic terms, and also reiterates the narrative potential that was lost in the mayhem of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Number 7. What was the point of Stormtrooper armor? One of the big misconceptions throughout Star Wars is that Stormtrooper armor is effectively useless. Well, it's definitely understandable why viewers have been left with that impression, given it doesn't protect against direct blaster bolts. Stormtrooper armor actually represented the pinnacle of military design in the galaxy far, far away. The plastoid material that covered each trooper was designed to offer some protection against glancing blaster fire, but it had other benefits too. Apart from looking intimidating, Stormtroopers also had access to an array of equipment in each set of armor, including a full utility belt, optional backpacks to carry further equipment, and an extremely advanced helmet. Stormtrooper helmets, referred to mockingly as buckets by the rebels, came equipped with their own heads-up display and advanced communication setups, which would directly interface with the battlefield and give Stormtroopers the edge in combat scenarios. It may not look like much, and it won't offer any protection against direct blaster fire, but Stormtrooper armor was far from useless. Number 6. What powered the Darksaber? Since its canonical introduction in the 2008 Clone Wars series, fans have found themselves captivated by the Mandalorian Darksaber. Created by the first ever Mandalorian Jedi, Tar Vizsla, eons ago, the Darksaber came to be an object of power on Mandalore, where whoever wielded it could lay claim to being the planet's rightful ruler, or Mandalore. The Darksaber differs in a great many ways to other lightsabers, boasting a black core and a distinct shimmering noise as opposed to the low drum of more traditional laser swords. It also has a unique hilt, more angular and less cylindrical than most other lightsabers. Apart from the exposition provided in shows like The Clone Wars and The Mandalorian, not much is really known about the Darksaber's creation, or what makes it so different to those other lightsabers apart from the fact it's powered by a rare black kyber crystal. This is an interesting detail given how kyber crystals are typically colorless until they make their connection to a given Jedi, which is when they take on their distinctive blue, green, or sometimes purple hue. Yellow, orange, and white lightsabers have also been recorded, the latter of which Ahsoka created by purifying the crystals in a pair of red sabers, but so far the exact origins of the Darksaber, and more specifically the reasons why it's so unique, remain elusive. Number 5. Why did the Empire phase out the clones? During the prequels, the clone troopers were introduced as the elite of the elite, modeled on the genetic template of one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy, Jango Fett. They were superior to battle droids, trained by the finest military minds and mercenaries, and would obey the Emperor's every whim once the chip that contained Order 66 was activated. So, why were they phased out and replaced with humans shortly after the conclusion of the Clone Wars? Clone troopers actually served as the first of the Empire stormtroopers for a good few years following the Clone Wars, and were even recruited to assist Darth Vader's Inquisitors as they hunted down survivors of the Jedi Purge, utilizing their familiar DC-15 heavy blasters in combat. However, due in part to the accelerated aging process that provided the Republic and then Empire with a regular supply of soldiers, it was soon decided that the clones should be phased out, with many aging more rapidly than regular human cadets. The Empire also shut down the cloning operation on Kamino, and by the time of the original trilogy, only a small number of clones remained in active service. Because the Imperials were no longer incurring mass casualties, it made no sense to continue developing clones. There's also the chance Palpatine wanted to tie off a loose end in the Order 66 conspiracy, and that would have provided the perfect excuse. Even so, the Empire continued to use the clone service during the Republic era as propaganda to recruit human soldiers, even as some troopers began to question their actions during the Jedi Purge. Number 4. How would a Jedi choose what lightsaber they wielded? A Jedi's weapon is extremely sacred. As relayed via the Clone Wars, we know that all Jedi younglings would take a ceremonial trip to Ilum where they would find their kyber crystal and construct their own lightsaber. But how does a Jedi decide what kind of lightsaber they want to wield, and how do they go about getting another crystal if the process is so sacred? We actually got some of the answers to this question in the Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston. It goes into a little more detail about how a Jedi would connect to a kyber crystal, how it would be invisible to anyone but them when arriving on Ilum, and then they would retrieve it. But they could also connect to a crystal already in use, which is how Ahsoka attains her white lightsabers before Star Wars Rebels. This is all fine and dandy for those Jedi who were seeking replacement lightsabers, but it doesn't explain exactly how or why one would decide to own 2 lightsabers, or even wield a double-bladed weapon. So what's the deal? The current canon is yet to lay out the specifics of how a Jedi would develop their own style of combat, keeping discussion focused instead on the different forms and some of the styles they adopted, and how a master could have an influence on their apprentice to pursue a particular one, but nothing so specific that would lay out the exact process of how a Jedi would switch from one blade to 2, for instance. The High Republic has provided some clarification on this issue, with Charles Soules' Light of the Jedi revealing that the Knights of the Era often changed up their weapons based on how their fighting style developed, or even if they wanted something a little bit more stylish, but it's still unclear how the practice evolved by the time of the prequels. Number 3. Why didn't Obi-Wan remember R2-D2? This one is very cheeky, given everyone knows that the real answer is because George Lucas didn't know he'd include R2-D2 and C-3PO in the Star Wars prequels he hadn't thought of yet, but it is worth mentioning. People have considered Obi-Wan's apparent lack of familiarity with his former Padawan's astromech a plot hole since Episode 1 released in 1999, but what they may not know is that Lucas will have taken steps to amend it in expanded material. So, the real answer as to why Obi-Wan doesn't remember R2 in A New Hope? He does. No, seriously, he does. And to get a slightly pedantic point out of the way as well, you should remember that Obi-Wan never says he doesn't remember R2, just that he didn't remember, quote, owning a droid. Either way, in the new canonical novelization of A New Hope, titled The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy, author Alexandra Bracken includes a paragraph that confirms Kenobi recognized R2, and that the little astromech knew him too. Here's what it says in the book. Han was about to turn back to lock up the circuit panel when he saw the fossil wave the droid over. The R2 unit moved to Ben's side as if it were his faithful pet, an image that was further reinforced by the old man stroking a hand over its domed head. "It's good to fly with you again, my old friend," the old man said, so softly Han wasn't sure he had heard him right. If anyone needs me, I'll be having a big cry. Number 2. Why did Vader obey Tarkin? Given that Darth Vader was, you know, a literal Dark Lord of the Sith, it probably seems a little weird in retrospect that he spent the vast majority of 1977 Star Wars being bossed around by Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin. No one should be getting in between Vader and a good Force choking, but the Grand Moff is able to do just that in the meeting aboard the Death Star. The Clone Wars already did a good job of establishing Anakin Skywalker's respect for Tarkin while he was an officer in the Republic, but their relationship it was taken to a whole other level following Order 66, as was revealed in Dark Lord of the Sith number 18. The Charles Soule comic reveals how Tarkin tested Vader before A New Hope to see if he could ever be bested in combat. Tarkin is able to outthink Vader, resulting in a stalemate once he force chokes them off, and that's how the two become the bestest friends ever, or at least evildoers who harbor a begrudging respect for the other. It's basically the same thing. And number 1. How are red lightsabers made? So, earlier on we took a brief look at how a Jedi would construct a lightsaber of their own. The process entails them sensing their own crystal through the Force, then traditionally making a pilgrimage to a planet where the crystals are abundant to find their weapon. Once activated in a hilt-date fashion, the crystal would emit either a blue, green, purple, yellow, or other such blade, and the process would sort of repeat itself if they ever sought another saber or needed their old one replaced. But this also raises questions as to how the Sith would create their own lightsabers. Would the kyber crystals naturally lend themselves to the dark side? Do the Sith also have their own sacred planets to travel to and harness the power within? You know, that sort of thing. The process, as it turns out, is a little more violent. In a way, exemplifying the dark side and how the Sith bend the Force to their own will, the most common way a Sith Lord would obtain a red lightsaber would be to steal a crystal from a fallen Jedi, or if they were once a Jedi themselves, use their own. Then they would corrupt the crystal, a process known as bleeding, which would turn it red. Kyber crystals are inherent tools of the light side of the Force, so every Sith has to obtain their own by battling the will of the Force itself. For instance, when he became Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker bled the crystal belonging to Jedi Kirak Infala, and then constructed a hilt similar in design to his old weapon. It just goes to show how evil the Sith truly are. And those were 8 Star Wars questions that probably always confused you. Let me know your favorite confusing Star Wars queries down in the comments below, and please don't forget to drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe to What Culture Star Wars so you don't miss new content coming every single week. But that's all for now. May the Force be with you, and I will see you next time.